Hi, my name is Cindy Rang with the Fabric Patch in Ephrata, Washington, and I'm going to show you how to make a 1600 quilt, or it's also known as a jelly roll race, and I don't know, there's probably other terms for it as well. It's been around for a few years. It's kind of a fun quilt to make. It's very addicting to make. So we did talk about it this morning in our morning chat, and while I was trying to describe it, I think I actually confused more people than educated. So I said I would just demonstrate it really quick. So we're just alone here tonight in my sewing studio, and I'm hoping this goes well and the battery lasts so you can see it through the end, because it is crazy fast. Once you've sewn all of your pieces together, it's 7 seams. So just for a really fast review, the reason it's called a jelly roll race is because you're using a jelly roll. And what a jelly roll is it's one of these. They call them different things. They're called designer rolls. They're called bolly pops. They're called I can't remember. Every fabric company has a different term for it. But what it is it's a collection of 2.5-inch strips that they've cut for you and they've put together so they all look great together. So you can certainly purchase one if you don't have a lot of leftovers. They come in all kinds of different colors and styles. Or if you have a lot of leftover fabric from other projects, you can cut it into 2.5-inch strips, or as we mentioned, cut it into 2-inch strips or 3-inch strips. It doesn't really matter. It's just that there are so many 2.5-inch strip projects out there that I always have leftovers, And so when I store my leftovers, I have it out of reach at the moment, but I generally try to keep them all together. So I have a bunch of different, this is from one jelly roll, some leftovers, this one is from another one, and I just put them all together. And when I have enough to make something, I'll kind of pull them all out. And that also means if you have a leftover chunk, so your jelly roll, your strip is 2.5 inches, typically by width of fabric, so it's about 40 or 42 inches. If you have just a little piece left over, throw it in there anyway, because of course in a jelly roll race or a 1600, you want all those funny little bits. It helps to make the quilt super interesting. If you're starting with a brand new jelly roll, and I'll mention this again at the end, you will want to cut about 12 inches off of your first strip. You don't want them to all be the same length as you're sewing them together. If that doesn't make sense, it will at the very end when I show you something. But I always just use my leftover stuff. So the one that I'm going to use today, I have a couple of different pieces in here and a couple of different leftover jelly rolls. Mostly it's from a line called Elements from Moda. I don't know that it's available anymore, but it's by Sweetwater, and a lot of their stuff all looks really similar, so it's easy just to throw bits in there and you'll quickly have a quilt that will come together and look like something that was absolutely planned. So the only thing you need besides your 2.5-inch strips is obviously your sewing machine, and then I do like to use a 1/4-inch foot. If you don't have one, it looks like that. There's a little blade on it, so I don't know if you can see that or not, but I like my blade 1/4-inch foot because then all I'm doing is butting my fabric right up against that edge, and it's just foolproof for my 1/4-inch seam, so I like that. And then the only other notion that you need is a good pair of scissors, and so it's not really thread snips as much as it's fabric scissors, because what you're going to do first is you're going to cut all of your selvages off. This has no place in your quilt. This is just to tell us what the fabric is, and it gives us a little color guide, a couple other fun things in there, but you don't want to sew with it. So as you go through these strips, it's just going to take a minute, and you can do this as you're sewing, or if you're somebody who just likes to kind of get it out of the way. And I kind of like to just do it all at first because it gives me a minute just to check all of the strips, make sure that they're all in fact the same width, make sure that I think they all play well with each other. And I'm just going to kind of give them a quick little once over. So it's a little fussy, but that's what I like to do. One other thing I'll mention is that if you use batiks, Batiks not only do not have a wrong side of their fabric, they do not have a selvage. So one more reason to love batiks. So I'm just going to go through this really quick and cut off all of my selvages. Okay, all done. All of the selvages are cut off, and the other reason that I like to go through and just do all of that at first is because I found two little rogue pieces in there that were 2-inch strips, not 2.5. They sometimes look the same. Maybe it was something that I just cut wrong. I'm not sure what it was even doing in there. But when you start sewing things together, you may not notice it until it's a little bit too late. And then you've got some ripping to do, or something that's just sitting wonky and you might not be sure exactly what's going on. So it's good just to double check everything, make sure everything is all right, and just kind of see how many strips you have. I have to admit, I don't know exactly how many I have here because it's a couple of partial rolls from a couple other things I was doing. And so, but my guess is that there's at least 40 here. So I think there's quite a few. I suppose we'll know by the time we're done, but there's a lot of half pieces and 3/4 inch or 3/4 length pieces. So okay, so these are all done. So the next thing is just to sew them together end to end. And so to do that, the big thing is don't give it a whole lot of thought. Don't worry that, does this one look good with this one, and shoot, I just picked that one up. It's not going to matter. Everything is going to touch everything. There is zero opportunity for planning. I'm just going to tell you right now, it just doesn't happen. So don't worry about any of that. All right, so what you're going to do is, I do chain piecing because it makes it go a little bit faster. So I'm just going to put my right sides together, and then I have to move my leg. Okay, so chain piecing, if you've sewn one seam, you're just going to stop, pick 2 more, and again, don't be crazy, just grab 2, right sides together, so right sides together, just keep grabbing 2 at a time. Butt them up against the other 2. Because all you're doing right now is chain piecing. Just keep grabbing any 2. after you've chained pieced them, what's happened is just that. All you've done is you've butted them up against each time so that you can quickly sew the next two together. So you just want to cut all of them apart. Once you've cut all of them apart, take one, take another one. We currently have them sewn in groups of 2. Now we're going to sew them in groups of 4. We're just going to keep doing that until we end up with one great big long strip. So groups of 4. Okay, same thing has happened. Now you have all of these that are all sewn together. You're going to cut them apart, and what will end up happening is you'll take this strip of 4, sew it to this one, strip of 8. I'm just going to keep doing that because my whole goal is, of course, to end up with all of these strips sewn end to end to end to end. And again, it doesn't matter what touches what. It's all going to touch everything eventually anyway, so it's not going to make any difference. What's going to make you crazy is not that. It's trying to keep everything from not tangling. So now I'm getting down to where I've got strips of 8, and so it's just getting to be too much and it's going to get tangled. So after I cut my strips apart this time, I'm just going to drop them in a little heap on the floor and pick up one at a time so that I've got, here's an end. And here's an end. And now, instead of chain piecing, I'm just going to go ahead and work in my one continuous length. So I'm going to go down until I find my end. And again, you can see I have some of those weird short pieces in there. Just grab another one, find the end, which is there. Right sides together. Okay, that was my last one. So now what I've got is this great big long strip with all of them sewn together. So that's where the name 1600 comes from, is because again, one jelly roll, which is 40-inch strips, is 1600 inches. So what I'm going to do is I have this end, I'm going to find the other end in this pile. And here's the fun thing, you don't have to like sort it all out. It doesn't matter. Just look for the end. wherever the end is. You just have to find the other end. Easy peasy. Now that you have the other end, I've got all of those strips sewn together, however many it is. Now I'm just going to take one end and the other far end, and I'm going to put them together, right sides together. That whole tangle, it doesn't matter. All I'm doing is right sides together all the way down. I'll show you what it looks like at the end. Quarter-inch seam allowance. So you've got 800 inches to sew, so it is going to take a little while, but it's half the time with each seam that you're sewing. As you get to your seams, I just sew them flat. I don't sew them open, but do what you feel is best. The quarter-inch seam allowance is important to make sure that your quilt isn't super wavy, and that's why I like the blade, because all I have to do is just butt my fabric right up against it, and it just guides right through there for a perfect quarter-inch seam. As you start to get to the end, what's going to happen is you'll see you have this weird twist, which was sort of inevitable because we just sort of grabbed the two ends. So it doesn't matter. All you're going to do is come down to the end, wherever that is, and just cut it. If you're not exactly in the right spot, it's not going to matter. You're going to trim up those edges at the end. You just want to make sure that everything is going to lay flat. So we're going to finish this seam. And every once in a while that happens, where you end up with exactly the same color on top of the other color. Again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. Don't freak out. Don't do anything weird. Doesn't matter. And obviously at the end, we ended up with the same color because we cut that strip in half. Okay, so once we've done that, now what we're going to do is we're going to do the whole thing again. We started with roughly 1,600 inches. We've sewn that together all the way down. Now we're at 800 inches. Now we're going to take this end, find the other end, right? It's up here at the end, 800 inches away. Woo! And now we're going to open this one up, right sides together, and we're going to sew this seam. We're not lining anything up because of course it's going to open like that, right? So you don't have to match it. We're just matching this side. Okay, so now I've got 400 inches to sew. You're probably wondering about now about pressing. There isn't really any pressing that happens until you're done. Some of the best advice with people is that the perfection is in the pressing, and that's true. When you are piecing blocks, you really do need to press things open and make sure that everything lines up properly. But this isn't that kind of quilt. All you're doing is you're sewing edges. So you're creating a new seam with every stitch. So the pressing can all be done at the end. That's part of what makes it so quick. So halfway through this, I've decided to stop using my foot pedal and start using my automatic sewing button. I still have a broken leg, and so I didn't last very long. So anyway, if I push that button, it just sews. So the same thing will happen with this one, right? Is that by the time we get down to the end, we're going to have this weird twist. So it's not going to matter. Same thing. We're just going to flatten this out and cut it. So that we can okay, so looks like this, right? So you can guess what we're doing next, right? So we've got, where are we at? 400 inches. Now we are going to take this end, bring it all the way down. Still pretty long. Up here to this top. So we're going to take, and again, we don't have to press, we don't care about any of that. All we're doing is we're sewing right sides together. And so we're just worried about this seam all the way down. It's going to take me half the time of my last seam. Okay, same thing. This one though didn't have any kind of a twist in it, so I'm just going to sew it right to the end. Okay, so we'll cut this one in half. Okay, so you know what's going to happen, right? So we are at the moment, we are 8 wide. I'm going to take this one, find the end, which is getting closer, and I'm almost done. Again, no pressing, because I'm just worried about this seam on this side right here. Right sides together, sew all the way down. Whenever you're starting and stopping like this, it's always best to stop with the needle in the down position, just so that things don't shift very much when you're stopping and tugging on things and getting ready to start sewing again. And it's oddly, even though I wasn't trying, this one didn't twist at all. So, and if it does twist, it doesn't matter. You're just going to cut that off. I'm going to go ahead and just cut it off now because I think it'll be easier. Okay, so here we are. We're at the bottom and we're 16 wide. And now the last thing is to do one last seam. Bringing this over. Okay, so normally when you're doing your jelly roll and you're doing 42 strips, 1,600 inches, by the time you flip it over and you sew those end to end 5 times, you end up with a quilt that's approximately 50 inches wide by about 60 inches long. Mine does not seem to be that big. I look like I'm probably at about maybe 40 inches. So my guess is that the jelly roll or the bits that I was using, I probably must have started with, I don't know, maybe about 30 strips. It was hard to know because I had a lot of leftover pieces, and so I had a lot of short pieces. So there isn't any real clear-cut math except for the length that you start with. If you know that you want a quilt that's going to fit a specific bed, just start with a lot of strips. Start with a couple of jelly rolls. It's not that you can't put a border on something like this, but anyway. So we'll get this last seam done, and then what I'm going to do is press it. After I press it, I'm going to trim the edges. Okay, that was my last one. I'm going to go ahead and just cut with scissors because I have to iron it. That's it. That's my jelly roll race. 1,600, or in this case, oh, I might have started with about 1,200. But anyway, I'm going to press it up, square it up, and I'll show you a finished picture. Thank you for watching our video. We invite you to leave a comment, hit the like button, or better yet, subscribe to our channel so you never miss an episode. You can also visit our Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, or Pinterest pages, or find all of those things and our online store at fabricpatch.net.